Just wrapped an interview with Andrew Sillitoe. He is a former professional hockey coach, and now he talks about creating a high-performance culture. In this interview, we talk about that a bit. We also talk about our fathers. My father was a businessman. His father was a businessman. His father actually made a lot of money with a bakery, then went into real estate and lost it all and died young. So we talk a little bit about that in the podcast. It's very emotional for me. He reminded me a lot about my father as he was talking about his father. So if that seems interesting to you, check it out. Here's my interview with Andrew Sillitoe. Andrew Sillitoe is a business psychologist, speaker, and the author of The 4 Keys. His innovative approach to leadership and work-life balance has earned him invitations to work with a range of companies, including Pfizer, Nationwide, Virgin, and the BBC. Today, he runs a training company for entrepreneurs and business owners who want to succeed in business, health, relationships, and mindset. Welcome to the podcast, Andrew.
Thank you very much. It's great to be here.
You were intro to me actually by Zach Obrant from Book in a Box, or Scribe, I guess they're called now.
Scribe now, yeah.
Would you mind going over your background a little bit? Because I think it's a little different than the type of people I normally have on here. For instance, you're very into sports.
I guess I am into sports, although it was a unusual sport for me to play because I live 45 minutes southeast of London, UK, and I grew up playing street hockey, and that was an unusual sport to play in this country. But in the 80s, the mid 80s, late 80s, it just got fashionable, the roller discos, and then the sport just evolved. And when I got to the mid 90s, I found myself playing in Canada, so I moved to Vancouver and sort of pursued a professional roller hockey career, really. The sport was sort of blowing up then. I guess I caught a bit of a wave, good timing, and it's been my life for 30 years. And had a wonderful experience. Played down in California, played in the big tournaments, and was lucky enough to represent my country in 11 World Championships and was head coach. And so that was kind of my life. I gave up the traditional sports of football, cricket, and rugby that we play over here.
How do you go from head hockey coach, and it sounds like you had a pretty good career, how do you go from that to training for entrepreneurs and business owners? How are those connected in your head, or how did you get there?
The coaching actually came before the head coach role. So a sport like roller hockey doesn't pay the bills. So I always had to have some sort of job. And I was, from leaving school, I guess I had an entrepreneurial spirit, and I had a market stall in London. I was selling suits to people in the city and just trying lots of different things. And then I fell into corporate work, and I worked for Yellow Pages. So I was my friends call me a bit of a sellout because I was, in a suit and driving around in a corporate car and all that kind of stuff. But I learned so much, and I realized at that point I was going in and seeing, 4 business owners every day. Someone who was a startup, someone who was a really established business. And my objective was to sell advertising, really. But I just loved the idea of really getting underneath the business and really understanding it. And I started to notice other things, just patterns. When I shared this in my TED talk, that my father was entrepreneurial, started a business. We had a bakery business, and unfortunately he just became stressed and overworked and overwhelmed, and he died of a heart attack at 48. So it's always stuck with me, and I started to notice the same pattern in some of my clients.
Well, so I thought, okay, on that for a second. So he sold his bakery and he went into real estate, right? And then the real estate went bust. What do you think happened there? Like, why do you think that happened?
Well, I think what happened, and it's not limited to just the real estate. Obviously, it's kind of physically getting fat and metaphorically getting fat on the cash. So my dad made a lot of money, and it was the 80s, and the property market boomed. We were building big houses, amazing holidays. We lived in a big house, and it just, as quickly as my dad made his money, just the whole thing unraveled. And he never really came back from that. The bakery was a very steady business. It goes back 3 to 4 generations. It's a very purpose-led business. And I think he just followed the dollar signs.
Was he very heavily leveraged with mortgages, or what led it to be susceptible to all fall apart like that?
The problem in those days was buying land. So finding land to build these big houses on. And it's kind of weird, but the house that we lived on an acre. There are probably about 5 or 6 houses now in our garden that we had. And my dad would complain that there just wasn't enough land. So it was under his nose, but they didn't really allow for that sort of thing back in the day. But as populations increase, they've got to find homes and build more homes. So you get these cycles, that follow the economy. And as a property, it's a vulnerable business. So I don't think it was over leveraged. Some people buy too many houses and the mortgage rates drop or go up, and then property drops and then you're in a bit of trouble. That wasn't really the issue. It was just my dad couldn't build enough houses. So yeah, he just never really recovered from that.
My dad died pretty young too, a little older than yours, 61 when he died. It was heart attack, like heart trouble too. It was also heart attacks. He had brain cancer also, but I think it was all due to stress.
Yeah. Well, I think these things play. What I've learned, certainly in the last 2 years since writing the book and doing the research and trying to understand, the role of nutrition and stress and all these things are combined. Doesn't matter how hard you can't out train that. These people that are doing chronic training and playing sports and entering triathlons and doing marathons and doing CrossFit every morning, this chronic stuff, you can't out train the stress and the bad diet. We have to take I believe we have to take a different perspective.
Yeah, suicide rates up too. What I was just on a consulting call a couple days ago, and one of the consulting clients said he wanted to kill himself. Like whenever he failed in the business, he gets this strong urge to kill himself. And I was telling him the same thing. Like I was telling him that's normal as an entrepreneur, especially if you're screwing up in the early days. Like that's totally normal to feel like the entire world's kind of crumbling down.
Yeah, you just want to close the whole thing down and forget about it and sort of hide under the covers. It takes some real resilience and good friends and good network and being open. The fact that he's saying it is part of the process, I think, and being open about it.
Yeah. So you're focused on, so you got your four keys: business, health, relationships, mindset. What are you seeing in terms of implementation here? So let's say you are like that guy, or I've been there so many times, like wanting to kill myself constantly, especially in the early days of business, for real. What do you do in that situation? Or like your dad or my dad who's stress eating, or I don't know how, I don't know how you end up that overweight. What do you do in that situation? What's the advice there?
It's less about advice, although there are small wins. The first thing we look at is the 3 steps. So we talk about the 4 keys: business, body, relationships, and mindset. But then we look at what the entrepreneur, business owner, in some cases leaders within organizations, what is their vision across the 4 keys? So what do they want to achieve in their business, body, relationships, and mindset? And that could be a 12-month, that could be 3 years, could be some cases we have 10, 20 years sort of goals. But they're quite loose. It's quite a loose, it's a bit of a fantasy, dreaming, being a bit deluded about it, and I encourage that. And then there's another component to the vision, which is who do I serve through achieving that vision? So how do my clients benefit? How does my family benefit? How does just people in my inner circle benefit from me achieving this vision? So it becomes a bit more purpose-led. So we make that balance between what you want for you and how you serve others through achieving it. And then we do a few different exercises, but then the main purpose is to say, well, okay, what do I need to achieve in the next 90 days? What do I need to achieve in the next 30, 60 days across the 4 keys? I call that a 90-day reset. And the whole idea is, how do I get into this action so it doesn't just become fluffy? It's actually, we're doing things, not just monthly, weekly, and daily. And for me, it's more about adding positive things to our life than taking away. I was at a conference today speaking, and it was a tough gig because I don't know how familiar you are with the recruitment industry, but I do a lot of work with recruitment business owners. It's quite a mature market here in the UK and growing in the US. But I had a 4 o'clock slot, and they'd been drinking since 12. Bottles and of red wine, and so there was a bit of jeering when I came on, and I was between them and the bar, but my talk is pretty sobering, and it really hit home with them. And they were asking me, because I kind of stopped drinking. This year I've not had a drink, and I've never really been a huge drinker. I've always had a love-hate relationship with it. I could put a few away if I wanted to and have a binge. So this year I stopped, and they were asking me, how have you done that? How have you stopped? And I said, well, it's not about stopping really. It's just about adding more positive things to my life and having a different perspective. So rather than saying I'm going to stop drinking, I might do something the next day that doesn't really work with a hangover. You know what I mean?
Yeah, no, I 100% know what you mean. I've been sober, I think, for 3 years now. It's the exact same thing. It's replacing one habit with another. So, like, when you first stop drinking, if you go out every night, knowing that you can't go out or you have to go out to some place and not drink, and then finding whatever that place is going to be is huge. Because otherwise, if you just go to the bar like you normally do, you're going to end up drinking by accident.
I feel like I've got over that. I feel quite empowered by that. And I've noticed people in my mastermind have said the same thing, that they feel empowered now that they can go to the bar and have a good time with their friends. And they realize they're inspiring others. I think that's the other thing that, coming back to the vision, my vision is to stop drinking, but who do I serve through stopping drinking? And actually, I'm inspiring my inner circle of friends, and more people are doing it. So I'm not preachy about this stuff. I'm not saying, look, everyone's got to stop drinking alcohol. It's if you have a beer and you enjoy it, then great, But I think going back to your point about how do you help people change, there's a piece that we do on the program which is called Live the Vision, and it's where what I call doing the work. So at an intellectual level, we get the vision, we get what we want to achieve, and it all makes sense. And then we have our 90-day reset, and that all makes sense intellectually because we've got our goals and it's all metric focused, and we're really excited about implementing it. And then all of a sudden we sort of self-sabotage it, and so at an unconscious level. And so we all have these patterns that manifest themselves that, Einstein's quote of you do the same thing over and over again, expecting a different result. these things are running at a subconscious level. And so once we unpick that a little bit, so we're getting into some of the deeper psycho. It's not therapy, but it's some of the deeper psychology. It's kind of way I would work with athletes, really.
That's huge. So especially around business system, I think one of my biggest weaknesses recently, last 6 months, I'd say, is I'll create a business system. I'll have the team go and implement it. And then the next week, I'll want to change something. And then the week after that, I'll want to change it. And I have to like force myself not to change it. I think it's tied to patience. So you said 90-day plan. Have you run into anything like that where like I'm constantly trying to make the plan better, and through that, it is the self-sabotage. It's destroying the plan slowly.
Yeah, I think there's a difference between iterations and improving it, or it's a bit cliche, but to pivot when necessary because either the tactics aren't working. But there's also the new shiny thing syndrome, where or we just get bored and we assume everyone else is bored of it, but actually it's very new for everyone else. Especially when you've got teams and they're trying to get their head around your idea and see it through your lens, and then your views change and they're trying to catch up. And I've experienced that. My guys will say the same. I have a team, and they'll often say to me, Andrew, so what are we working on this week? Anything changed? So yeah, that resonates with me, and that's something I think it's in a personality. I think it's quite an entrepreneurial personality as well, because you're never really satisfied. It's that growth mindset of it could be better, and actually for the most part it's good enough, and we just got to see this through for a little bit longer and test it and run it, and then let everyone else catch up. I get that.
I think it depends, right? Because yeah, so recently we rebuilt our systems we moved from a contractor only model to an offshore like Upwork model only, where we're paying people hourly, and basically we cut our costs by 80%. The goal is to keep the same result. Within that, when you implement huge business change like that, at least for me, like I'm so tempted to try to talk to everybody on the team constantly and constantly be pinging them, asking them how it's going. But really what I need to do is sit back and wait for them to implement it.
Yeah, and there's a piece around accountability and the role of you're essentially being the head coach, right? So it's you want your locker room, everyone in the dressing room to understand their roles and responsibilities and what they're supposed to execute, and then the head coach's role is to hold the mirror up and hold them accountable against what they said they would do. But sometimes we just need to test these things and have a bit of a play with it and get comfortable with it, particularly if we're introducing new systems and processes.
What's your business look like right now? You said you had a team. It looks like you have some enterprise clients. What does that kind of look like right now?
So at the moment, I actually have two companies. One is a sales and training company that I've been running since 2012. I actually started it back in 2008, and then I was just too early with it, and with the credit, the crunch, and everything else. So I restarted that in 2012, and that's grown over the last 7 years. More so in the last 3 years. So we're starting to scale now. So either through online and bringing on other trainers to deliver the IP. So that's starting to see a shift with that. So that's exciting. And then I started a new company called Get Fit to Win, which is really aimed at entrepreneurs and business owners. And I didn't really know what it was going to be at first. And the 4 keys kind of came out of Get Fit to Win, and this idea of doing the work across these different facets of our life. So as I'm still in that kind of entrepreneurial kind of figuring it out stage, but as it is right now, Get Fit to Win is the brand, is the business, and the 4 keys is one of the products. And I've gone all in on the 4 keys, and it just seems to be, I've been doing this for over 12 years now, this work, and they say, whether it's the 10,000 hour rule or 10 years or whatever it is, but it's like everything's come together, and this 4 keys piece is really resonating with people.
So I've heard the 3 keys before, right? Which is, I'm going to bring this back in 1 second. So business, health, and wealth. Right, or business, health, and relationships. What I heard it as health, wealth, and love. I think whatever, same kind of thing. But then you added mindset, which I think is incredibly key. What was it? I was reading some Reddit post today. It was like this guy was broke and he was asking for solutions, and then the comment section was just full of solutions for budgeting and like where he could cut costs. And every single response to one of their helpful suggestions was a reason why he couldn't do it. And I think that speaks so much to mindset. How do you approach that? What do you think about? What does that word mindset mean to you?
I think mindset was really where I started. So that's evolved. My first book, Managing the Mist, was about embracing change and having the right mindset around. So that was kind of where I got early on, and I worked with traders back in 2007-8. So for me, mindset, I break it down into 3 components. And the first one is self-awareness. As cliche as it sounds, it's self-awareness, and it's not so much just knowing ourselves, but knowing our triggers, knowing how, what motivates us, knowing what frustrates me, what stresses me out, what are the things that put me into fight, flight, and having that level of self-awareness, what stimulates me and gets me into action. And then there's also the personality piece as well, the DNA, what makes me, what is my makeup, if you like, from a personality perspective. The second component is the ability then to manage the emotions under pressure. So your thoughts, your feelings, particularly when under pressure. So what an athlete might refer to as being in the zone, that ability to just maintain clarity under pressure and see the opportunity. And I think if I'd written the book now, I'd probably talk about things like mindfulness and noticing behavior. So that ability to catch ourselves. So I put a post out the other day just talking about having the courage to act rather than react. So often we're just reacting, a bit like your guy on Reddit. He's not really acting, he's reacting. He's just he's asked for advice, and whatever comment he gets back is seeing it as a threat. Right. So he's just this hardwired human nature to kind of go, I've asked for something, but you told me something now and I don't really like it. So I'm just going to defend it.
Do you run a successful business that sells to other businesses but feel like you could be doing more? Well, at Experiment 27, that's exactly what we help other businesses do. Our focus is finding cornerstone clients, finding people in the Fortune 500 or finding brands that are over 15, 20, $30 million in revenue, a lot of times billion-dollar brands, and using our marketing tactics such as cold email or targeted content to find those customers and sell them on your business. If that sounds interesting to you and you want to learn how we met with, it's most of the Fortune 500 at this point, along with dozens of billion-dollar brands, companies like Krispy Kreme, Walmart, Morgan Stanley, and a ton of other ones, go over to experiment27.com. We'd love to chat. It made me think so much because he was deeply in debt and he was very poor, and all of these things, every solution that was being offered was an amazing solution.
Yeah.
And I was just thinking about how am I trapped in any of these areas? What I know I'm not experiencing this around money. Where am I experiencing this? Right?
Yeah, well, that's the self-awareness, isn't it? The fact that you can kind of have that conversation with yourself shows something about your mindset. And so it's a good example of why you're doing the things you're doing. Some people won't do that. They just keep looking outwards and looking for things to blame and to make excuses. And the people that I know that have had most growth are the ones that can hold the mirror up and say, well, what is it I'm doing or not doing that's causing this reaction, rather than looking for things outside of my control. So we can choose to focus on the things that we can influence, or we get pissed off about things that we can't change. And some people sit in one or the other. And I think those that sit in that circle of influence and recognize, hey, I can actually change this, whether it sits with me changing my behavior, or I can have a different conversation or implement something new, change direction. They're the ones that tend to move on and have more success.
With your coaching program, so you're trying to take it, or you're scaling it from just having you do the coaching to having a team trained on your system, or you did this already? This is the process you're going through.
Yeah, to have people, accredited on the 4 keys. In fact, someone approached me today and said, would I be able to become a 4 keys coach? I've read the book. I really like the book. I like the language and the tone of voice, and I'm kind of buying into it. And I thought, yeah, that is a natural next step for this. So obviously I have an online program, but most of the work at the moment is me working with entrepreneurs one-to-one. And that is either actually meeting people face-to-face in London or wherever, or online. So I've noticed recently that I'm getting more inquiries from the States, and it could be because of the podcasts that I've been doing and the fact that Scribe is an American publisher, but I'm doing a lot more coaching on Zoom. But I think for your point, just from an entrepreneurial perspective and scaling the business, it would be to start to have some sort of accreditation for it, so that I can have more coaches out there offering this structure.
How do you think about business? Because you use your father as an example, and I think he's an example in a couple ways, right? Because he's a very successful business owner. 2 times, it seems like he took a successful bakery, spun it into a successful real estate thing, and then he also failed in the real estate and died of a heart attack, right? So it's there's a lot that you could have learned there. What are the lessons you took away from your father's story?
The main lessons for me were that he moved too soon. I don't think he looked at the bakery and said, what do I need to change within this industry? Because Safeways had opened up it would have been the 86. They started baking bread on site. So my dad kind of just conceded really to that. He didn't think, right, what can I do? And I remember saying, I was 11 when he closed the business. And I remember saying to my dad, look at the amount of schools, because I've been working in the bakery since I was 4. So I was, I was quite, by the time I got to 11, 12, I was ready to go really in my mind. And we had this amazing big oven, and essentially it was a pizza oven. And I just kick myself now because I just think we could have there's just things that we could have changed within the business. So it was less about closing it down and jumping into a new industry. It was more about evolving what he already had. And I think a lot of business owners can learn from that, is that sometimes we have to change sooner than we think, evolve the business sooner than we think. We don't necessarily have to shut one down and start something new. So you look at all the, Apple's a great example. They didn't sort of shut it down. They just created new products and sort of shaped the future, really. And I just think there was an opportunity for the bakery business to take just a slightly different detour, and look for different opportunities. So there was that. That was one of the biggest lessons for me.
Do you think that happens with time? Because it seems like a lot of business owners, that's what happens, right? They'll either get committed to one business and then kind of drive it into the ground, or they will keep evolving, or they'll start a second business. Like for some business owners, if your dad had won in real estate, the story would have been completely different. He would have started a separate successful business right there.
Yeah, absolutely. It could have done, but that's a good point. And one of the things I talk about is that I don't think my dad fully understood the industry. I don't think he fully understood the real estate industry. I don't think he was skilled enough. So when I speak to entrepreneurs, and particularly since 2010, we've had a good economy over here. It's grown year on year out. And they say, oh, my business is growing. I'm like, well, of course it's growing. The economy's growing. Let's see how to manage the next 5 years, because that's when it's going to get tougher, when there's a downturn. And that's when people show their true colors and how skilled they are and how well they know their industry. And I don't think my dad had the knowledge to navigate that as well as other people in the industry did.
That's interesting. So the coaching seems to come from maybe like advice you're trying to give your dad.
Yeah, I think I do see that in people. I always think, right, if I was to go back now to that 45-year-old man, bearing in mind most of my clients are between 35 and 45. But when you're 11, you think 45 is ancient. Now I'm 3 years away from that. So yeah, I do often think, what would that conversation look like or sound like? And I think that's why coaches are key. I have a coach for several different things, and the conversation with me is either, Andrew, well done, you're doing well, or Andrew, needs to be better, pull your finger out. And that accountability keeps me moving forward, and also gives me perspective. It's that time to slow down, to speed up. But I think for a lot of entrepreneurs, it's just go, 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 and they miss the opportunities.
Yeah, for sure. Is there a reason you didn't go into bakeries?
That's an interesting one. I said today that I feel still like I've got this baker in me, although I don't eat bread anymore. I gave it up. And I gave up all grains, so it would be a bit of a hypocrite baking bread when I don't eat it. But the first person to tell me that bread wasn't healthy was my father, because he just said there's no nutritional value in bread. Because I used to eat a lot of sandwiches as a kid. So, but I do have this feeling. I walked past a bakery yesterday, and I was just envious.
So after the 80s, there were a couple big bakeries. Panera Bread blew up.
Oh yeah.
I don't know how it turned out in the grocery store chain. I don't know if one bread baker is supplying the dough for all these grocery stores. There was probably an opportunity there. Like you said, the schools.
Oh, I'm sure. Lots of different opportunities to grow the business and be a supplier, and to these things, just different ways of thinking. Those opportunities were missed. And bread took my father, he wouldn't have even thought of putting sun-dried tomatoes in a loaf of bread. I mean, that just wasn't on the radar in those days. It was either brown bread, white bread, ice buns. You go through a supermarket now, and there's so many different things you can choose from. So I think just that whole industry changed massively.
Is there anything you recommend, or what is there to look out for if you're in your dad's situation? So for instance, my cousin has a retail store.
Mm-hmm.
They sell medical supplies out here, and they've been going down for the last couple years. And now it's been like they don't even have a website. They're not on Amazon, and they've been around for 40 years right now. His dad started it. So what do you do in that situation? If you're him, how do you see there's a problem? Because he does see there's a problem now with his business, but how would you even go about fixing it if you're that many years late?
Well, that's a good question, and it's less about what we'd actually do to fix it, but the process we would go through, starting to look at the customer. It always comes back to the customer, and I think we forget that as a business, is what does the customer actually want? People say, I don't want to change my processes. I'm not interested in being on social media. And it's kind of like, well, your customers are on social media. So we need to think about that. Right. I spoke to someone yesterday, and I said, you might want to think about just automating some of this stuff, and maybe starting to just create some click funnels and just really tap into that pain that your customer's experiencing, and see if you can take them on a bit of a journey and do some split testing and just see what works. And they said, oh no, we still want to do flyers, and that's how we want that face-to-face interaction, and that's how we work. And I'm like, well, maybe your customers don't.
Where does that come from? So where do you think that response came from, of wanting to do flyers, even though it's obviously not working?
I think it's because that's what they want. It's what they're used to, and it's change, and it feels clunky, and they're not re-engineering. They're not working backwards from the buyer's process. They're looking at it from a seller's process and looking what's easy. It's about having the courage to change. I think we had a golfer here called Nick Faldo. I talk about him in my book, and about how he completely broke down his swing and changed it. He realized that it was not going to help him win the championship back in the 90s and be successful. And he broke it down, and he was worse for a while. Everyone thought he was crazy for doing it. But then he went on to be really consistent and win some big tournaments. And business is the same. We have to change, and it feels clunky and uncomfortable, and we have to disrupt ourselves and get through that. But it's comes back to my original point, which is, what's your vision for your business? Well, we want to make X amount of money, and we want to have X amount of turnover, and I want to have this kind of lifestyle. And it's, well, how do you serve your clients that way? Who benefits from this? And when you start to kind of look at it from the client's perspective, then it changes the action. If the business doesn't change the action to support the client or the customer, then they're going to be in big trouble.
It's so interesting because it does lead to, if you're not changing anything, it's such a slow death that you could put it off for, like my cousin put it off for 15 years wanting to change anything. It's only now that he has to deal with it, but it's not like he didn't see it coming.
No, it's a bit of a boiling frog scenario. It's like everything's great. It's just the industry hasn't really changed. We're all good, and all of a sudden, bam! It's, oh yeah, probably should have done that. So yeah, it's hard. It's hard. I mean, look at the, it's not limited to small industries. Look at Kodak. I mean, they created the first digital camera in the 70s or whatever, but they were so concerned that digital would cannibalize their film industry that they didn't release it.
If they had just started some little digital division, just some kind of test, 10% of their resources into some futuristic test.
Yeah, exactly. And then Canon and Sony thought, right, okay, well, we'll have that.
It reminds me of, it's actually similar to health in a lot of ways, because nobody goes out saying they're going to get extremely fat. It's like stressful meal. You're thinking about like, oh, maybe I shouldn't eat that, and then you eat it anyway. It really does build up, but it's not like you don't see it happening.
It's insidious. That's the problem. It's a really good example, because business is insidious as well. The days go by, we keep doing the same thing, and over time, without realizing, we're getting the business is becoming unhealthy, just in the same way our bodies do.
What's the name of your book again? And if you wouldn't mind just telling us where we can check you out online.
The book is called The 4 Keys. My website is andrewsillitoe.com. So that's SILLITOE.com. My main playing field is LinkedIn. I'm on LinkedIn a lot, and Instagram, etc. But if any of you your listeners are on LinkedIn would like to connect, it'd be awesome. And then if you've got entrepreneurs, we've got the Get Fit to Win group on Facebook as well, which is just a free group for business owners and entrepreneurs. And I'm usually pumping stuff out daily on there, just tips.
Awesome. Thanks for being here.
It's been an absolute pleasure. Thank you very much.
I hate most business content out there because they don't deliver enough value. It's almost like they're trying to give you as little as possible so they can sell you on a course. And I've hated this business content for years now. So in order to fix that, I decided to start making content on my own. And that's what we focus on the Alex Berman YouTube channel. They're in-depth business tutorials, takeaways, real email scripts that we have taken and we've learned from doing sales for almost a decade now, having generated hundreds of millions of dollars in leads for our clients and millions of dollars in sales for them. So we're giving all of this stuff away for free. You can get a playlist of our most helpful videos on b2bsalestraining.org. It'll go right to the YouTube channel, or youtube.com/Alex Berman. And once you get to that channel, it's not enough to just watch the videos. Give it a subscribe. And I would love to see you around. Right now we post 3 videos a week. We've been doing that for the last 4 years. See you soon.